Hi, welcome to the setup class for the iRacing Late Model Series. My name is Gary Hensley, and I'm going to be your instructor in this class. I'll be teaching you how to build a balanced late model setup. Maybe you've just come from the rookies, or maybe you've been around in the late model for a while, or maybe one of the other series, but you've been using a fixed setup, or you've been using whatever someone else has given you, and now you've decided, I want to learn how to build my own setups. Well, I'm going to take you through the setup building process as I use it. Other people have different methods than the methods I use, and that's fine. Whatever works for you. But the process that I'm going to show you is a simple way to set up a balanced car. You'll understand why you're setting it up this way, and you'll be able to make changes that are going to improve your handling and the longevity of your car. Before we get into building the car itself, let's talk a little bit about the goals of what we're trying to accomplish. For my cars, what I want is three goals to be met. I want to be fast. We want our lap times to be the best possible lap times that we can get on this track. Second of all, we want it to be lasting. The lap times need to stay good as long as possible. And finally, the third thing, the car needs to be raceable. I don't know how many times I have gotten into a car that's fast and might be lasting, but I can't pass anybody because it's way too loose on exit. So we need to be able to pass the competition with our fast car. That's part of the racing experience. I like to say that the setup is only part of the winning combination. There is no magical setup that will automatically make you a fast driver. It's true that we need a fast, lasting, and raceable setup, and we're going to work on these. But as a driver, you have a part in this as well. You need to be smooth and consistent. You need to learn not to overdrive the corners, and you need to learn how to accelerate out of the turn without spinning your tires. You have to learn how to pass the competition. So as much as we're going to spend working on setups, you need to put a huge amount of effort into learning to drive the car as well, because it takes both the setup and the driver to be a winning combination. Finally, let's talk about the methodology for building a setup. I have a specific method that I use that I want to teach you. It's very simple. It's very easy to understand. It's broken down into three parts. First is the preliminary setups. We're going to work on gears, tires, fuel, and a few other things to get the car to where we can start testing it. The second part is balancing the car using tire wear and temperatures. We're going to adjust the static weight, the ballast, the ride heights. We're going to work on the springs and the sway bar and the track bars to get the tire and wear temperatures where we want them. Finally, we're going to fine-tune the car for handling and speed. We're going to work on the camber. We'll make adjustments to the splits on the track bars. We'll adjust the shocks. All of this will be to make that car go as fast and as quickly as possible through our corners. It's the corners where you make your speed. It's not the straightaways. You win the races in the corners. The fastest car that can get through the corner is the car that will win the race. So remember that as we're working on this, the faster we can get through a corner, the better our times will be, the better our position will be at the end of the race. Okay, so let's get started with our build. Now, where do you start from? That's always the first question I hear a lot of times. What do I start with? So you really only have three options to choose from. If you look under the garage, you can either load an iRacing setup, which you'll give you a list of the ones provided by iRacing. Or if you're in a practice session or a race, someone might share a setup, in which case you could load one there. Otherwise, it's going to be one that either you have saved or somebody has sent you. And you can download a setup off the forum, or someone might email it to you or something, and you'll need to save that in the correct folder. And that folder is listed on the screen beneath you, the path, but it is simply a directory in your My Documents under the iRacing setups late model, and you just save it in there and it will show up in your directory under My Setups. Also, when you modify and save, you can see I have several that are saved in here. You can save them and work on them. Now, as you make changes, you definitely want to make sure that you save them. I like to use versions so I know what changes I've made. Any kind of method that you want to do. Something else you can do is this cancel button as you're making changes. Let's say we make a few changes here and we made changes that we did incorrectly or we didn't mean to. We can always hit cancel and it will discard the changes. You notice it put it right back from where I was. So you can use those methods to modify your setups. Now we're going to start with the baseline, and to do that you select the iRacing setups, and we're not going to save the current setup, and we're going to select the baseline, the late model baseline that's provided by iRacing. The reason why I like this is because this is a very balanced setup to begin with. It has a good spring package on it already set up. It has 250 pound springs in the front, 200 on the left right side, and 475 on the right rear. It's also got the correct amount of gas, but it's got the wrong gear ratio for this track. Now, that is one of the first things you want to do before you ever start testing, is find out what the gear ratio is. How do you find out the gear ratio for the track? The easiest way is if it's a track that there is an iRacing setup for, and I'll show you a very simple way. We're going to save our location at the moment by selecting Done. Done will take you back out to the track. When I come back to this, reload it, then anytime I hit cancel, it's going to revert back to this setup as it is right now. So I can simply go into the iRacing setups. I can select the USA Basic setup. Take a look at the chassis section. We have the tire section, the chassis section, and the note section if you want to add additional notes. Look down at the bottom for the rear end ratio, which is set at 498. So this is what iRacing says you at least need to have, and I say that very carefully. You at least need to have a 498 to start with on this track. But I can tell you right now that is too low of a gear for what we need. But we're going to start with this. We're going to select the 498. Now if I simply just go back to cancel, discard these changes, it puts me back, well, it should put me back to the baseline. Maybe the yeah, maybe the latest set changed that. So anyway, we reload the baseline. We're going to select 498 and apply, and then I suggest you do a save and name it whatever you want. Let's just call this practice 1, and let's save it. Now this is a setup. This is a baseline. We've set the rear end ratio. It's very important that we set the rear end ratio. One thing about your gear ratio is that this is something you constantly need to be checking. You do not want the light to come on at all. I know there's been some comments that say you want it to come on at the end of the straightaway before you get to the turn, but that is incorrect. Your RPMs are way too high for this car. This car likes a lower RPM. The maximum RPMs that you want is no more than maybe 72 or 7300 RPMs. Even less is better. In fact, not even going over 7,000 is a good thing. But you have to balance out with the low end too coming out of the track. So it depends on your track, depends on your driving style, but this is something you will constantly need to change. Now, you when you change it, going to a higher number slows you down. The lower numbers are faster. So lower is faster, higher is slower. This is, think of it as a bicycle sprocket on the back end of a 10-speed. On a 10-speed, the bigger ones are for the lower gears. So if you want to go fast, you need that rear end sprocket on the biggest gear, and that is what this is doing. So the lower ones have more power, slower speeds. The higher numbers are slower, the lower numbers are faster. Okay, so we have our rear end ratio set. The next thing we want to do is set our tires, our tire pressures. Okay, these are the default that it comes with. I like to do 18 on the left side, so I'm going to change that, and 28 on the right side. It gives me a pretty good balance on most tracks. And the next thing we want to do is to set our stagger. Now there's a couple trains of thought on stagger. One is to ignore it and just use it for handling. The other, which I adhere to, is to set it correctly based on the real life calculations that are used in racing. There's a spreadsheet that, calculations in spreadsheets that are out there. There's a spreadsheet that was done by Matt Holden that tells you based on the track what your stagger should be for the late models. That is based on Circle Track Magazine's Bob Boyle's formulas that he came up with. They're pretty much industry standard, and so if you were to look that up on there, it would be 1500 or 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. So if we set these to 1.5 inches, and the other thing is that sometimes the reason why we put stagger, and stagger is the difference between the circumference of this tire versus the circumference of this tire. So what happens with our cars is we have a fixed axle on the back, on the rear end. That axle turns both wheels at the same speed. The wheels are the same. But what we're doing is we're making this right-hand tire larger than the left-hand tire by adding this stagger. The tire itself is larger. The reason we need to do that is because as we go around the track, the outside tire has to travel further than the inside. By making this right tire larger, we're allowing the wheels to travel at the same speed, but the tire being larger will travel the distance further that's required of it while going at the same speed. Now if this stagger was set too high, then what happens is the outside tire travels too fast and we get a loose condition. If the outside stagger is set too low, then the tire does not travel fast enough and we end up getting a tight condition. If we're loose, we're going to spin on exit. If we're tight, we're going to be forced into the wall. So what we want is this set correctly. Now I like to set them both the same. Some people will have very little stagger on the front. Some people will have even more. At this point, it's a handling, um, fine-tuning method for that. So you can actually use the stagger to help you with the front end. Um, they are independent. There is no fixed axle, so there's no real need for them to be the same other than for handling. I like them the same because it gives a very balanced feel, very neutral feel to the car when they're set the same. It's totally preference, but that's the way I like to do it. So I'm going to ask you if you would do that. So we're going to set the stagger for both to 1.5 inches. So we've got our left-hand tire pressure set at 18. We have our right-hand tire pressure set at 28. I like to start out with this kind of setup. Now on our chassis, we changed our gearing. Whenever we change our stagger and tire pressures, it is going to change the ride height. There will be times when you will need to adjust this before you can ever do any testing. So if the ride heights are off, if the car does not pass tech, then you will need to adjust them. And any way that you adjust them to get them to pass tech, 1 or 2 clicks, is fine. Now you can raise it and lower it. To raise a corner, you use the shock collar offset. The shock collar offset is when you actually lower the number, you'll notice the number goes down, the ride height goes up. So the left-hand click will raise the ride height. The right-hand click will lower the ride height. Okay? We'll be using those later in our session. But for right now, we passed tech, we're good. Okay? Now I can tell you right now from early testing that this car is going to be way too loose. Way too loose. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust for that. Normally what happens is you're going to make this setting and you're going to go out on the track and you're going to realize that it's too loose to even test, seriously do any testing. So the easiest way to adjust for a too loose situation is to lower both track bar heights down, maybe 1 or 2 clicks at a time, till you get to a level where it's comfortable, where you can get around. Because the whole idea of what you're trying to do right now is to get the car manageable so you can start taking a look at how the tires are wearing with this setup. So we've got to have a drivable car to do that. Now, I'm going to ask you to lower your track bar height to about 8 inches. We will be raising it later, but 8 inches is real comfortable right now. It's not too tight, not too loose. Maybe a little tight, but that's okay. So we're going to set it to 8. Now whenever you increase your stagger, most of the time you will need to decrease your track bar height because the rear stagger increase will make the car looser on exit. Okay. If you lower the stagger, you may need to raise the track bar height. So you can use this here to fine-tune and get it. This is making this change really is kind of a course change to the car at this point. We're just going to make whatever adjustments we need to make it drive. Okay, so this is our first changes that we're going to make. These are our preliminary changes for setup, and this gets a car ready for us to start testing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this again, make sure I have this saved, And I like to do that as I go along so I can go back to those and and maybe test a previous change going in a different direction. So the other thing also, you'll see this truck arm preload. Whenever we change ride heights, it affects the weights on the car, which causes it to twist. The truck arm preload are shims that are put on the car to make the rear end kind of level. And so whenever we see this number, we want to make sure that it's at least within one click of 0, either one click below 0 or one click above 0 based on your preference. So I'm going to make sure I like it on the negative side unless it's just way too far off. But what happens is the negative um, allows it to be a little loose on exit, which is, I prefer it to be a little loose on exit than too tight. So I like to have this on the negative side. Um, Again, it's your preference. Now, you can use this also um, as a fine-tuning tool without um, affecting the rest of the car. So uh, by adding a little more negative number, the car will be slightly looser on exit. Let's say you are just a little too tight as you're coming off and you're coming up and rubbing against the wall. Well, you could do a click or two on this preload and just kind of loosen up a little, free it up on exit. Conversely, if you go the other way, go positive, then you're actually tightening the car. So on exit. So this is a fine-tuning tool and just allows you a little freedom to make those fine adjustments. Okay, so again, we're going to save this, make sure it's saved because it tells us we're modified up here. So we're going to save it, make sure we've got it saved, and now we're going to go out and test. Okay, so the first question is, how many laps do we need to run? Well, what I like to do is I like to run somewhere between a quarter to a fifth of the number of laps that I need to run for the race. So for the USA track, this is a 50 lap race. So I want to run at least 10, but probably more, somewhere between 10 to 15 laps. 15 is a really good number, but at least 10 laps. And whatever number you decide on, you need to do the same number of laps. It helps you to get a good idea where it is if you stay with those same number of laps. Don't run 8 one time and 12 the next and 15 later, because it kind of skews the results of what you're looking for. So I like round numbers. I like the um, multiples of 5. So 10's a little low for me. So I'll probably run 15 laps of testing each time I go out. And what are we looking for? Why are we testing? Well, what we are looking for are the numbers on this page, the tire page. The tires are affected by the setup that we have on this page, the pressures we have on this page, the stagger, and the way we drive. All of that impacts these temperatures and the tread wear. So when we get back from running our 15 laps, we're going to take a look at these and we're going to learn more about how the car is set up and how well it's running based on these numbers. Okay, so go out, run 15 laps with these changes, come back and we'll take a look at those temps. Okay, welcome back from your laps. I hope you've run 15 laps, and I did, and I've loaded up the garage again, and now we're taking a look at the results of our testing. And the things we're going to be looking at, we're going to be looking at the last tire temps on our tires, okay? And we're going to also be looking at the tread remaining. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but the first thing I want to do is make a change to the gear. Now, you probably noticed, because I sure did, that the red light was coming on way before we wanted it to. Before we ever got to the end of the straightaway, that light was coming on. What was happening was our car could go faster than our gearing was allowing it to, and it really affected our lap times. So again, the reason why I let you see that is to notice the huge amount of difference we're going to see. Now, normally what you would do is you would just begin to lower this number, going up this list here to a lower number, and testing that, maybe running a lap or two until you find one where the gearing is good. Now, I did this for you already, and so we're going to set this to 477, okay? Because our car can run pretty good at that RPMs with that gearing. So we're going to go ahead and change that, and we're going to save this, and we're going to give it a new number. Since this is a new set of tests, we're going to call it practice 2. We're going to save that, okay? Because I like to save my settings as I go along. Alright, so let's go back to our tire wear. Why is these numbers important? Why are we looking at them? And what are they telling us? Well, what happens in a car, as you probably already noticed, if you've ever driven your car and slammed on your brakes, what happens? Everything that isn't tied down comes flying forward. The reason for that is a thing called inertia. That's a physics term for basically the things that are in motion will continue to go in motion. And what we're seeing is in our car a weight transfer, depending on which direction that we are applying the force. Okay, so the g-force that's in our car will cause that weight to move around. Okay, now this is true whether the car has a suspension or not. In a go-kart, which has no suspension, you still have weight transfer. Even though it doesn't have springs or shocks or anything like that, the weight still transfers because of the physics of inertia that is causing the weight to transfer. And when we come into a into a corner and we start to hit the brakes, then the weight moves from the back of the car toward the front of the car. Okay. Then as we begin to make our turn to the left, that weight starts to begin to transfer to the right side. Okay. So that's why our right front takes a lot of beating a lot of times, is because we're coming into a corner very fast, we're applying the brakes, we're putting a lot of pressure on the front tires, but as we make our turn, we're still continuing to put pressure. This tire takes a lot of pressure on it. Then as we're in the middle of the turn, the weight starts to even out on the right side. And then as we start to come out of our turn, it shifts especially toward the right rear. And again, this is where you see if the car's too loose, you start burning up this right rear because there's too much weight on it. It starts to lose grip. Okay, and then of course it settles back on both the left rear and the right rear tires as we're straightening out. Okay, and then it kind of slides back toward the middle, and we do it all over again in the next corner. So it's really important that we get these weight transfers the best we can, because what happens is the more weight we have on a corner, the more work it does. Okay, so if we put a lot of weight on this right front, then it works really hard. Okay, if we work it too hard, then these temps and this wear is going to go, we're going to wear the tire tread too much. We're going to see really high temperatures. Okay, now you'll notice on our setup we have kind of high right rear temperatures. That's because we have a loose condition. Okay, we have a little too much weight on this right rear, and we're going to have to adjust for it. Notice also that we have a, a lot of weight here up on this left front. When we're coming in, we're braking. We're getting a lot of work on this. Our left rear is relatively cool. It should be a lot higher, but it's not, and that is because we got too much weight on the front. So we're going to adjust that out. Also want you to notice too what are known as crosspairs. Okay, we have the relationship of the front, we have the relationship of the back. So we have front to back temperatures, we have front to back weights that we want to check, but we also have the sides that we want to look at, especially the right side. So we want to compare the right front and the right rear. We want to see these balanced, but also what's known as the crosspairs. That is the right front and the left rear versus the left front and the right rear. So we want to look at these numbers together compared to these numbers. Okay, they will tell us too if our cross weight is too high or too low. And actually, what we're noticing, is that our left front and our right rear are much higher than the right rear and the left front. So we actually need to add cross weight to this car in order to balance this out. Okay, why is this important to us? Well, because if we get our cross weights closer together and we get our weight transfer better, then we wear these tires less. More weight, more wear, more temperature. Okay, because that's what these numbers are telling us. We have way too much weight on this right rear, and we notice that also it's confirmed by having a loose condition on exit. Your front tires dictate entrance mostly. So any changes to the front usually will impact entrance. Any changes to the rear will usually impact the rear. And of course, the right front and right rear relationship and left front, left rear relationship will impact the middle of the turn. Okay, so the changes that we make, each change has specific impact to certain areas. Okay, so first thing we need to do, we need to get some weight off the front of this car. Okay, so how do we move weight in our car? Okay, there are a couple ways we can move it. First thing we see at the very top, we see ballast. Ballast is basically lead weight that can be moved forward and backwards. It allows us to shift the weight forward by increasing this number, or backwards by decreasing it. Okay? If it's a negative, that means it's more back. And as we change it, and any time that you make a change to some of the areas, you'll see the apply button show up over here. If you wait long enough, it will change. If you don't want to wait, then just click the apply. And of course, this middle button, you can click it all you want. And what it does is it recalculates the page. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to start with my ballast set to 0. So I'm going to do that. Okay, that moves our weight more to the rear. What that did to our car, though, is shifting that weight backwards affected our ride height. So now our heights are a little higher in the front, lower in the back. But that's okay, because we're going to make a change to that in a minute. We're going to adjust our ride heights. And Ideally, what we'd like to see with our ride heights, and it depends on the track, is that our front ride heights are a little lower than the rear heights. Depending on your setup, I've run it either level and anywhere between uh, 410 and 420 is fine. With the ride heights even, kind of even, with no real split between the front and the back. So setting them, say if we wanted to do about 420, we'd set them all somewhere around 420, and it really doesn't need to be exact. What we're really more concerned about is the impact of our nose weight and cross weight by making those changes. Okay, but another way to run, instead of running level, is to run with the rear spoiler up high in the air. Okay, the reason for that, and it's a good practice, the reason for that is by putting that spoiler up and slanting the front down, what we're doing is we're keeping the front nose um, down on the ground. We're not allowing the air to get underneath the front of the car, and we're increasing our downforce by having the rear spoiler up in the air. The middle of the car, the roof of the car, um, can impact the amount of air that is going on the spoiler. So by running at level, you're actually using more mechanical grip. By raising the rear and lowering the front, you're using the addition of the downforce. The difference, though, is that when you raise a ride height, you increase the amount of weight on it. So you need to adjust, and that's where this ballast comes into play. You can adjust it forward and back and still preserve your ride heights, and that's the value of that. Okay, so what we're going to do, let's go ahead and set our ride heights pretty low in the front and way up high in the back. Okay, now the way we do that is that we adjust, we have to uh, unattach this left side, okay, and that is the left side of the sway bar. The reason we have to unattach it is because if it's attached and we start making changes, what we actually do is twist the chassis, okay? We don't want to do that. It's going to give us incorrect numbers. So we need to make sure that we uncheck this attached left side. Then the next thing we want to do is make sure that this says passed or something else, doesn't say apply. If it says apply, we need to click it. In fact, you can click it all you want. Again, it doesn't hurt anything. Okay. And then lastly, before we start making any changes, we need to set this left bar clearance to about 5/16. Okay. And the reason for that is if we leave it low and we start making adjustments, if it goes into the negative, you'll notice our numbers start getting strange on us without this really changing. So we need to move this up to about 5/16. Okay, that gives us clearance, gives us room to move around. And that's essentially what we're doing. We've unattached the left side, but we still need the left bar clearance. And so we've got to do clearance. And if this goes negative, then it actually again starts twisting the chassis, as you can see. So we set this about 5/16, or at least 5/16. If you want to go up to 10, you can do 10. The more clearance, the better. Okay, but I've found that 5 is just fine for most of what we do. Okay, again, make sure that the apply is not showing. Okay, now we're ready to start making changes. Okay, so we want to lower this front end. And the way I like to do that is left side will raise, right side will lower. Okay, and what we are doing is we're actually changing the shock collar offset. When we lower the shock collar offset, you notice the number goes down, we are actually raising the ride height. So if we raise the shock collar offset, we actually lower the ride height. Okay, so we're going to do a few clicks, and the numbers we need to change them to is we're gonna lower the front, and I'm looking at my notes here. We're gonna lower the front left one 3 clicks, and I didn't notice where I think that's 1, 2, 3. Oops, let's go the other way. Well, here we go. Let's just cancel. Okay, now we canceled. We need to go back and all the changes we just did. So it's really important that you save as you're going along. Attach left side. Give our clearance. Okay, so this is our ride height at 407. I want to go down about 3. 1, 2, 3. And yes, I know it says it's too low and it's failed. Don't worry about that. Do the same on this side. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Actually, we're going to go one more. 4. Okay. Now you notice they're pretty close. Now we're going to raise the back, both of those 5 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. We're still too low. Oh, we didn't do our ballast. Change our ballast to 0. Okay. So we're showing a little low on this side, but actually when we reattach this, now when we reattach, what happens is that we do just the opposite. We're going to take this back to about 1. Okay, set it about 1, attach the left side, hit apply, and now you see we're good. We have a ride height of 4.03 on this side, ride height of 4.04 on this side. Okay, our rear is 430, 431. That's pretty close. Okay, so we're level, and our left side's down just a hair, and our ride height, we're low in the front, we're high in the back. We look good. Again, our rear end ratio, we've changed that. So let's go ahead and save this. Okay. Well, we can always come back to that if we mess something up. Alright, so now what we've done is we've moved some of this temperature on the front back. Okay, but now here's the thing. We want, when we move this back, that means this is going to be hotter. We're actually cooling this down here, the left front. But we're actually making the right rear even hotter. We're cooling this down, which we really don't want. We want this a little more warmer. We want to put a little more pressure on this right front and a little less on the right rear. But what we've done is we've slid it backwards this way. So we're moving these temperatures back this direction, which is good on the left side, but not so good on the right. And we still need a little more on this left rear. Left rear is very hard to get pressure on, so we can add a lot to this left rear and never really hurt anything. Think of this kind of as a free wheel. If you need to move it anywhere, you can always move it onto this or off of this. It's not really going to make an impact. Okay, these are the ones that matter the most, and this one kind of works together. So what we're looking at then is that our cross pairs are too cold, our main cross pair. Okay, this is considered the cross pair. This is the opposite cross pair. So what we need to do is actually increase our cross weight. Now, cross weights. Okay. There are two ranges for cross weight. This is based on Bob Boyles's circle track. Okay, he says one range is from 48% to about 52%, but then there's a higher range above that, which is from about 52 to 56%. Okay, so 50% being kind of a balance there, we can actually go up to a 54% and be balanced as well. Okay. The value of the higher pair is on a flatter track. Now this track is kind of borderline. It's got a little banking to it, but it'll pretty much work with either one of those sets. But if you're on a flat track, you want the higher cross weight pair. You actually want it above 52%, probably in the neighborhood of 54%. And so that's actually what we're going to do. We're actually going to raise this up close to 54%. What we would normally do in a situation like this, and what I did in preparation for this class, is that I went through and raise a cross weight up in increments until I found a good setting. Okay, and that's generally what you're going to do. Okay, your ballast, I like to move my ballast back to 0 right off the bat because it's just something you don't change a lot of. Okay, so we're going to raise this cross weight. Now let me show you how we raise the cross weight. Okay, and what I always like to do is exit the garage and come back in before I start making cross weight changes or significant changes, because that allows me to use the cancel button. Now whenever I hit the cancel, it's going to go right back to where I was, or it should. I don't know with this new build. Anyway, so, and we did save it, so we're right where we want to be. We can make changes and always come back. So to make the change, we're going to adjust right heights, and what we're going to do is add weight to the crosspair corners, the right front and the left rear. We're going to remove weight from the left front and the right rear. The way we do that is by raising the right height. But if we raise the right height, then we end up throwing the other corners and the right heights out of whack. So what we have to do is what's called a rolling weight change. Okay, we're going to roll the weight from one corner to the others. Okay, we do that by raising one and lowering the others. Okay, so you're going to see me do this, and we'll do it together. And what we're going to do is we're going to unattach our left side, hit our apply, let it calculate. You notice it says it's failed. Not a problem. Remember, we saw that when we attach, what actually happens is when we attach this is it picks this left corner up. And so we're not too worried about that. And it actually twists a little bit. We're twisting that front from the left side over to the right. We're going to raise this up to about 5. Okay, we're going to make sure it doesn't say apply. Okay, now the way we shift this is we're going to go down one click on this corner weight. And we're going to go up on the right front. Okay, we're going up on the corner pairs. We're going down on the opposite corner pairs. So we went down and up. So left rear is corner, or is a cross weight, so we're going to go up. Right rear is opposite cross weight, so we're going to go down. Now you'll notice we're pretty much leveled out. We're changing a little bit, but that's okay because we're going to adjust for it later. Okay, but now if you look, our cross weight went from about 51.2, I think, up to 57. So we gained a 0.5%. So that's one time. We want to run this up pretty high to pretty close to 54. So we're going to do it again. Down on the left front, one click. Up on the right front, one click. Up on the left rear, one click. Down on the right rear, one click. Again, you see now we're balanced. We're shifting a little bit. You can see it's shifting from the right side over to the left. That's okay. That's okay. Not worried about it. So now we're up to 52.3. We've gained close, well, yeah, about a 0.5% again. Let's do it again. Down, up, up, down. Okay, we're balanced again. Now at 52.8. Okay, we've done that 3 times. We're going to do it one more time. Down, up, up, down. Okay, now we're at 53.4. Good. Now, the only problem with this is when we attach this, remember it twists right front to the left, where our left front's going to actually be too high in the air. So we actually want to go down one click. Now the interesting thing to notice is that when you lower a corner, you actually impact the other ones as well, especially the opposite. You'll notice our ride height here is at 420, and it's a little low. But when we lower this one, it goes up. It also lowered the right side front and the left rear just a little bit. Okay, that's okay. Now what we're going to do is put this back to 1. We're going to attach and apply. Okay, now notice we failed. Okay, and that's alright, because what we're actually going to do now is we are going to twist this just a little bit. And the way we're going to twist this is we're going to go negative on this. So if we click it once, and again, oh, oh, you know what? We went, let's go ahead and raise this side one click. There we go. There's our numbers. So you can use this left side clearance to go, and it twists the front end a little bit. Helps us get things in balance. Okay. Now it's better to have the left side, oops, went the wrong way. It's better to have the left side down a little bit because you want to keep this corner down here for the aerodynamics. As you're making the turn, it's going to tend to lift in the air. So the more you can keep it down, the better you're going to be. And we're twisting it down a little bit. But now our number crossweight's up about 53.6%. That's good. It's about where we want to be. Okay. And we have our rear end up in the air more. In fact, we could probably go a little bit more. Let's go up one click on each side. I think I might have missed a click somewhere. Yeah, those are our numbers we're looking for. Okay. So just kind of feel free to play with that a little till you get it in that range. Now we're real close to 53.9%. Do you see how it kind of changes? Okay. All right. So now we want to check this truck arm preload. Anytime that we make changes to our ride heights, we want to go back and double check this again. Make sure it's about one click away from 0. Okay, that looks like a good number there. It's never going to be 0. Just get it close. Anywhere close is fine. Okay, I like these numbers. This is what we're looking for. We're about 1/4 of an inch up in the air. That's a good number. We could go a little higher, but this is actually better. Okay, so let's save what we got. Now, what this is going to do, we've moved the weight off the front onto the back. When we raised the rear, we added even more weight. We moved the ballast back. We raised the rear higher. That added more weight. We also added weight. We took it off of this corner and this corner, and we moved it to the right front and the left rear. So our starting static weights, okay, notice we have 795, 773, a lot of weight on this left rear. This is a free corner. You can load it up as much as you want. It's not going to hurt anything. Transfer it this way, transfer it this way, transfer it this way. This is a free corner to load up. This corner can't have too much weight. So now what we've done is we've adjusted our static weights. Now these are the weights that we're starting with. Remember, this weight's going to transfer, okay? And that transfer is called dynamic weight. And you've heard of the term wedge. Well, this is your wedge. Cross weight and wedge is the same thing. If someone says you need to add more wedge, what they mean is you need to add more cross weight, either statically or dynamically. Okay, you want to impact these two corners is what they're saying. Impacting this corner or the two of them together, or making these adding weight to this corner or adding weight to this corner, or removing weight from this corner or this corner, increases the cross weight or increases the wedge. It's the same thing. They use that term interchangeably. Dirt trackers like to use wedge. Wedge is a very common term you'll hear. It just means we want to work these two pairs more. The reason is that makes it tighter. If you want to take away wedge, or what they say, you want to free it up, then you want to take weight off of these, and that's going to free this up. If you increase weight on these two corners, then you make the car tighter. If you decrease the weight on these two, increase it on these two, then you make the car looser or free. You're freeing it up. That just means it's less tight. Okay, so that's what we've done. We've added more wedge. We've increased the cross weight up. So let's take this out and let's see what it did. you'll notice that it'll probably be a little more tighter. It won't be loose off the exit as much. Maybe a little too tight as you're going out. We'll adjust for that in a little bit. Chances are it's going to be a little tight in the center. Okay, you may have to turn it in a little bit more when we do this. So we can later on, if we find it's too much, we'll adjust it out. But what we're really looking to do right off the bat is get these tires in balance. We're not looking for handling yet. We're looking for balance. Okay, we're looking to get these close. Okay, so let's go out and let's run 15 more laps and come back and take a look at our temperatures. Okay, welcome back. You've run your 15 laps with the weight changes that we did. So now you should be seeing some different numbers. And the front's still a little bit warm, this one, but we've also noticed too that the right front is now a lot hotter. The right rear is now a lot cooler. Well, we wanted that to happen, but not as much. So we're going to have to do something else. Okay. Now, the first thing you can adjust that we did, which is the static weight. Okay. And that's not the only thing that we can do to affect weight transfer. We can adjust the static weights. We can adjust the car geometry a little bit by raising and lowering the track bar and the cambers. But we can also adjust the weight transfer affected in the dynamic sense. Okay, so when that weight transfers, we can actually divert where it's going um, based on our chassis settings. Okay, and the way that we do that, the number one way we do that, is by these spring rates. Okay, so the spring rates basically impact weight in this sense, that if you increase the spring rate, if you stiffen this corner, then more weight will transfer to it than the relative corners. Okay, so if right now on the front I have more, or I have even splits between my spring rates. When I brake, essentially the same amount of weight is transferring equally to those. Now if I want less weight to go to one or the other, what I want to do is lower my spring rate. Okay, lowering my spring rate will make that corner softer. When it's softer, then it will roll more. Okay, and it will actually absorb the weight, and so the weight will then transfer to the stiffer corner. Okay, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're actually going to soften this corner. Okay, when I soften this corner, instead of it getting worked more, it will get worked less. This will actually transfer to this corner or this corner. Okay, and we will work this corner and this corner more and this one less. We'll work this one more when we're braking. We'll work this one more as we're turning. Okay, acceleration will not be this corner will not come into effect that much during acceleration, but it will be braking and cornering. Okay, conversely, we actually want to increase the spring rate on the right rear a little bit. Okay, and that will work this corner more. We'll actually be giving more dynamic weight to it. And this is also known as dynamic cross weight or dynamic wedge. This is what we're doing. We're dynamically changing the wedge or the cross weight number. If we were to leave this the same, this cross weight, when it transfers, would be impacted by what we have. Um, and so the springs, as well as the shocks, the shock stiffness, which is the bump is the stiffness, the rebound is when it's coming back up. Those impact this corner. Increasing the bump stiffness resists the weight going to this corner, slows it down, and adding rebound to it holds the weight there longer, doesn't let it go away. So increasing those numbers. If we want it to go to this corner faster, then we would lower this, and we'll get into that more later. But that's again stiffening and softening this corner. So what we're going to do is get our weight to transfer less to the front right. We can't move it, say, from here to here. So, because we did already move it, you can pretty much only move it back and forth and move it to the crosses. Okay. You really can't move it too easily off of one corner. Probably in real life you could more by because you have movable weights, but in iRacing the only way to really transfer it is by changing the ride heights and rolling it. So we tend to use the spring rates a little bit more than probably real life, where you would be able to, add a specific amount of weight to this corner. Okay, so stiffening a spring rate is the same as adding weight to a corner in terms of the relationship of what it's going to do, how it's going to make this corner work more or less. So we want this corner right here to work a lot less than it is. The way we're going to do that is we're going to make this softer. We're going to lower the spring rate. How's that? And that will, when we brake, transfer the weight this way, more onto the left, because it will have more weight, more dynamic, cross weight caused by the springs. During the turn, it's going to transfer some to the right, or to the rear, right rear. We want a lot more transferred based on our numbers, and so we're going to actually increase this as well. Okay, so to change shocks, or to change spring rates, you basically click on the spring rate here. We want this to go down. This is actually down. So we're going to go down from a 250 to 225. Okay, and that's actually physically a much taller, or shorter, yeah, in this case, spring. Actually, I think it's taller, which change our shock collar offset. So what we need to do is bring our ride heights back up. And the easiest way is actually, let's go back and discard these changes. Okay, and first thing we want to do when we're looking at these, we actually don't have to go through the unattached to do one if we do one at a time. So what we want to do is we want to look at our ride height. Notice what it is, 405. We're going to change our spring rate, apply. We're going to see where our ride height is, and then we're going to raise or lower the ride height till we were back where we were. Okay, the value of this, I think we have to do about 9 clicks to get there, and that's about it. That's pretty close. It's off a little bit, but the value of this is that we change the spring weight without changing the corner weights. We like the corner weights where they are, but we want to lower the spring rate. So that's how we do that. Okay, let's do the same on the right rear. We're going to increase this. So we're going to increase it up to 500. Our ride height's at 430. Now with a larger spring, you actually have less clicks. The smaller the spring, there's a lot of difference in height between the two. So it's actually very small on a going 25 pounds up on a 475 to a 500 is only one click difference. So we change it, we apply it, and we're going to go back down on our ride height, which is this one, till we're even. See, now we're at 405s, 428s, that's where we were before. We're all good. Okay. The other thing we can do, I mentioned, is the shock settings. Okay. Shocks are a timing tool. They don't actually change the amount of weight that's going to them. What they do is change when that weight gets there or how long it stays there. If you want to slow down, okay, the weight getting to this right corner, you would decrease this. Slowing it down causes it to happen faster. It lowers the stiffness of this. Okay. If you think of shock being stiffer, it's harder for you to compress. It takes more force for it to compress. And the rebound stiffness, it takes harder to pull it away. So we're actually we're saying that you have to apply more force to that corner to make it go down. Now it's going to reach there eventually because all that weight is going to eventually transfer there. But what we're actually doing is slowing it down. We're keeping that weight from transferring at the rate that it was. So shocks are a timing tool. And by increasing the stiffness on the bump, then we're slowing down the weight to get there. We're making the weight get there later. Okay, that's a good thing. Okay, and you'll notice that this is a 9 and this is a 6. That means the weight is transferring here slower. Okay, that affects the handling too. Okay, getting the weight on this left front, what this actually does on a flatter track or a less banked track is that it causes this corner to grab more. We're keeping the weight on this corner. On a flatter track, without the banking, the left front wants to lift, and that is because of the weight transfer. The weight is shifting. When you brake, it goes to it, but as you begin to corner, then it tends to go to the side and to the right rear, and it lifts. Okay, it causes this weight to transfer in this direction. Okay, so doing two things. By increasing the spring here, we're actually keeping this right rear down, or up actually. We're not letting it sink. We're not letting it roll. It's stiffer. Okay, we're causing it to work more by doing that, but we're not allowing it to roll. Okay, the roll then keeps this left front tire on the ground. If we soften this up like we soften this one, what's going to happen is that this corner is going to lift more as we go. Think of it as a table that has legs that are out of balance. Okay, our spring rate sizes are the balance, are the links. Okay, so we have a 250 here and a 500 here. So this weight is actually now going to rock back and forth. The car is actually physically going to rock more back and forth this way by having these less. And so we control that rocking back and forth, that transferring. We're going to keep this corner down. Keeping this corner down and softening this is going to let the car turn more. It's going to grab more and turn more. Okay, allowing this this to be softer and allowing this rear end to come up a little, the left rear to come up, is actually going to disengage this left rear and is going to allow the car to turn more. When you have the left rear engaged, if you put big springs back there and keep that rear end, it helps it on exit, it hurts it on entrance. If you can disengage the left rear and keep the left front engaged, then you're actually going to be able to turn the car a little more. Okay, so we've done that. We've made those changes. Let's go ahead and save this. We're going to save it as practice number 3. Okay. One of the things I want to do, though, is I want to make a change to the rear shocks. Okay, we're going to do something that the A and the B cars do a lot, and that is we're going to add a lot of bump. Okay, what that does is it slows the weight to go to the rear. The value in that is that it's actually going to tighten the rear end on exit. Why do we want that? Because we've actually loosened the car by what we did. Lowering this front, whenever you lower the weight or lower the spring rate, so that it's softer and it rolls more, then you actually are increasing the grip at this corner. And increasing the weight back here and increasing the spring rate is now causing this to be a little more stiffer and therefore less grip and more more loose. It's a little more loose now. So by changing these bump stiffnesses, actually what we're doing is we're slowing the weight transfer to the back. It's going to get there, and the value of this is we're going to keep this corner down up here. It's going to help us to turn, but we want the bump stiffness to be a little more stiffer. Okay, now the other thing we're going to do is we're going to lower the rebound. Okay, the rebound is the transfer of the weight off of this corner, off of these. So actually by lowering the rebound stiffness, we are letting this rear end, actually let's leave this one at 6 and let's lower this one to 0. And what we're going to do, that'll keep the rebound weight still on this rear when we come up to entrance, but it's going to allow this one to really get free. We're going to be able to disengage this left rear. Okay, so we're going to save these changes and go out and run 15 more laps, and let's see the difference, what happened to this. Also notice the handling changes. You're going to notice that it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to turn in a little better, and should be pretty close. We're getting really close. We have one more change to make after this, but we're pretty close to a nice balanced car. This is actually going to balance it out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work with the speed and the handling. Okay, go out, run your 15 laps, and let's come back and take a look at our changes. Okay, welcome back. Car should feel a little better after that. Get a little more turn in on it, but it's still tight in the center, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to take care of that right now. Let's go ahead. We're going to do a save as. We're going to name this number 4 so we don't override our previous changes. And let's talk about the track bar heights. Okay. Now the track bar heights, what that does is if you raise them together at the same amount, like right now they're at 8, there's no split between them. then the raising and lowering the height basically affects the geometry of the car a little bit, and then it raises the roll center height. And by doing that, we're actually transferring a little less weight, which is making these shocks stiffer. As we raise that, because we transfer less weight, it makes the springs stiffer in the back. Okay, so basically stiffens the rear end by raising it, softens the rear end by lowering it. Think of it very much like a rear sway bar. Okay, it's not quite the same, but it has the same effect. Track bar, the track bar or the panhard bar, what it's also known as, simply is a bar that keeps the two rear wheels in line with the chassis, keeps it from moving side to side. Okay, that's its purpose. The heights on that are adjustable on both sides. Raising it and lowering it actually raises the difference in the rear end and the axle. Okay, so there's an adjustment there. It changes that. So it kind of in effect is like a sway bar. Okay, the value of it comes in when you split these. Okay, if you raise the left rear track bar, okay, left side affects entrance, right side affects exit. Think of that. Entrance, exit. If you raise this number, you're going to loosen the entrance. It's also going to tighten the exit a little bit, okay? If you lower it, it's going to tighten the entrance and loosen the exit, okay? And of course, the same on this side in the sense of um, raising it is going to loosen. Anytime you raise it, it's going to loosen. Anytime you lower it, it's going to tighten. So it's going to by raising this side, it's going to loosen the exit, and it's going to slightly tighten the entrance. Okay, lowering it is going to tighten the exit, and it's going to slightly um, um, loosen the entrance. Okay, so really what we want to do is we want to raise this track bar. We don't want to lower it because the car's pretty good where it is. So we want this one where it is on exit. What we're going to do is we're going to raise this number. It's the other one. Raise this up to 9. Okay, and raise this to 9 inches. So we now have a 1-inch split between them. Now, splits. Anytime you have a split, okay, that's going to affect the balance of the car going into and out of the corner. The front end affects entrance. Any splits or any changes, splits in spring rates, splits in shock rates, splits in weight, anything like that is going to affect the entrance. The rear end is going to affect exits. Same thing. Difference in spring rates or shock rates, things like that. The track bar is going to affect the exit. My dog is barking. Okay, so what we're going to do by doing this is we're actually going to loosen the entrance in the middle, and it's going to tighten the exit a little bit. So it's actually a good thing. This is what we want it to do. Okay. Something else that we want to do is the camber. We didn't adjust the camber yet. I have a tendency to wait toward the end after it gets balanced. But this camber's off a little bit. We know that because our temperatures are kind of telling us. The easiest way to really get this right, you can look at the static temps, but those don't always tell you very much. The best thing is to, if you know how to use the telemetry, to export the telemetry out to either Atlas or Motec and watch the three temperatures as you're going into a turn. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how these are affected. You'll notice this one's really low. Same with this one. We're going to adjust that. But if you, when you go into a corner, you can see if they're kind of rising close. Um, you can obviously tell from the telemetry that your caster, or not your caster, your camber is off. Okay, so on the right side you're going to have a negative camber. On the left side you're going to have a positive camber. What that does is the wheels are both slanted in the toward the same direction. Okay. The negative camber on the outside causes the top of the tire to point in, the bottom of the tire to point out. Um, on the left side, the top of the tires is pointing to the left and the bottom is pointing to the right. So they're slanted uh, toward the inside of the turn. The tops of them are both slanted toward the inside of the turn. So we actually have them slanted too much. So we want to go down about 1. Oops, that's up. We want to go down on this angle about 1 on the right side and about uh, 2 on the left. Down to 4.3 and 4.6. Those are pretty good numbers based on telemetry, and I went and looked. Okay, caster is purely preference. This is stock. This works good. A 2-degree split is pretty good. Causes the turn-in to be a little easier. But this really doesn't, this is all fill. This is what you like. If you like a firm front end, increase the number. There's a tendency now to see them all the way up at 5. Okay. I like the default numbers where they're at. They're pretty good for me. I'm used to that feel. Okay. Something else we didn't mention is the steering ratio. Sometimes decreasing this from a 12 to a 10 will help you with your turning. Just kind of depends, especially on a small tight track like this. The larger tracks you want to go with a little more steering ratio number, higher number. On a tight track where you really want to get the front end turned over, it's kind of nice to have the 1 to 10 ratio, or 10 to 1 ratio. Okay. Again, after we do all this, we want to check our truck arm preload. It's gonna knock that around a little bit. So it's close to 1. It's positive. I kind of like a negative. That's a good number. Anywhere within 1 click is good. Okay. Something else too is that we want to increase this. Let's go up 2 with this, with the rear end ratio, because again, we're starting to see the light come on. So 465 is a pretty good number for this track. Okay. As your car gets faster, as it gets more in balance, it's going to get faster, and so you want to continually watch that. Watch your RPM gauge and see if you can raise your rear end ratio. You don't want to raise it just way up there, because what happens is that it tends to bog down a little too much in the corners. So you gotta get that. You want it to where it doesn't go too high and it's not too low in the corners. The faster your car gets, the more you want in the rear end ratio. Remember, if you lower this, we saw what it was when it was way down, whatever number that was. It was just the engine couldn't rev fast enough. The car could go a lot faster, but the rear end wouldn't let it. So as your car gets faster, as it can handle the faster speeds, then you want to bump this rear end ratio up, which is actually lowering the number. Going up on this screen makes it faster. Going down on the screen, again, the higher numbers, slower speed, slower numbers are higher speed. Okay, so we did that. Let's go ahead and save this and go out and run your laps and come back and wrap it up. This is pretty much the last of the changes that we're going to do. We'll talk about some optional changes that we could do after you come back in. But right now this is all about handling. How does it handle? Because our numbers, our tire wear numbers now look good. If they're off, um, that's where you want to start changing them. See what you can do. Alrighty, go run some laps. Okay, welcome back. Um, Hopefully it felt a lot better. Should have been much better on entrance and exit. Hopefully you noticed the changes in the gearing got you maybe a little faster time. Whenever you make your car faster, you want to remember to raise that rear end ratio and allow your car to travel faster. So what changes do we need? Remember, every racer, every driver has a different way of driving, has a different preference. Okay, so when I do setups and I post them, a lot of times I don't finish the last part. Okay, I'll leave the shocks or the track bar adjustments alone. Kind of leave them level or something like that, or get them close in this case, and allow the racer to do the final last changes, because everybody has that little different feel that they're looking for. So even if you get a set off the internet or off the forum, or somebody gives you a set and says, hey, this is really, really fast for me, chances are it may not always work for you. Everybody drives a little different. So how do you make the changes? How do you make it handle a little better? Well, if it's say if it's a little loose or a little tight overall, if it's a little loose, you want to increase this cross weight maybe. If you're this is kind of a course change. Remember, we did it several times. We did the round rolling change several times. But we're up to 54. That may be a little too high. It could come down. Again, this is going to affect your tire wear and your temps. The other thing too is you need to take this out and run a full load, because you need to check and make sure you're going to have enough fuel. Maybe 10 gallons is too much. You might need to lower that. You might find that after the full number of laps, the 50 laps like on this track, it's wearing a little bit differently. Maybe you're driving it a little bit differently. At the end of a race, you want to check and see where it's at. Is there anything you could do to make it better? It's never really finished. It always can be improved. So those are different things you need to check and look for. Cross weight is going to be a course change. You can make a minor adjustment to it by one click somewhere. We can do a minor um, lowering of the cross weight by raising this ride height once. You notice that it dropped down. We can even do it again, and you'll see how much the cross weight went down. So simple things like that, just fine-tuning a little bit. We can also, we did track bar change, so we can make that change to fine-tune it. Another thing that we can do, we didn't mention, is we can raise and lower our tire pressure temperatures, or tire pressures. If we want a little more grab on the right rear on exit, we can go down one. Softening it is going to give that tire more grip. So Generally, that's the kind of change you want to do, is soften it a little bit, one corner to give it a little grip. We can soften the front. That will give it a little more grab on the turn. We can even go up on the left rear a little, or left front, or down, whatever it needs. The car will tell you when it needs. You just have to learn to listen for it. Have to learn the feel of it. That only comes through experience, through lots of laps. It's typical for me. I found out that when you run tests, there is a limit to the number of laps you can run. It stops counting somewhere after 500. I know because I've reached over 500 laps in testing. So in one session, that is. So you run lots of laps to get things, much better. And how many laps you want to run is really up to you. You can make this change. This particular setup, it's not going to be the fastest because it's not quite done yet. It needs to be personalized, but it's going to get you pretty close. It's not going to make you a top-tier driver. You're going to make yourself a top-tier driver. The setup is only going to help you get there. And remember that the setup is not driving, you are. So you are responsible for how well you do. The setup has to be tuned for you and your driving style and for the track. And that's your job, whether you get the set from someone else or whether you make it yourself from scratch. Something else you can do is, when you find that this is a good setup, is make sure that you save it for future use, and there might be a time when you want to use this particular setup on another track. Maybe on, say, Dover would be a good similar track that it might work with. So that's, kind of the thing, is that when you find something that really works, you want to reuse it. Okay. That's pretty much it. So I hope you gain something from this class, this walkthrough. Again, I'll be on the forum. There are many good guys on the forum. If you post a question on setups or how to make something, I'd be glad to help you. It's a D license series, so we expect a lot of new people, people who are learning, and it's a great place to learn. Once you learn this, there isn't there's a lot of it that transfers to the next level, to the C, the trucks, the B cars, or even the cup cars if you're interested in that. So the main premise behind what we did works with all these cars. I did mention this is a coil binding front end. I don't know if I explained that, but on a coil binding front end, what happens is that this particular springs, the softer springs up front, go all the way down to where they bind. Now, generally it's going to be this right front, and that's what you want. This is known as what's a coil binding setup, also known as a big bar soft spring. There's slight variations between a pure coil binding and a pure big bar soft spring, mostly in the rear end. And if you want some good explanation, look at Justin's class on that. There's a video for that. But this is a coil binding type of front end. Okay, both big bar, soft spring, and a coil bind car. The front end's coil bind. Okay, there is a conventional setup that you can do where you raise the spring rates up over 300, closer to 400, and make the front end much more stiffer, and then you soften the rear end. This spring right here will go all the way down to 200 or 225 or even 175, this inside spring rate can go down even further. It has a different feel to it. So that's something you can try as well. And I think this next season I'm going to be putting some conventional type cars out too, posting those, since I think we'll be seeing more of the baseline coil binding setups from other people. So I may put some out with a different look to them. But the whole thing is there are many types of setups. There's no perfect setup. Whatever works for you is a good setup. So remember that. You may get a good setup from someone else. It may not work for you. But with a little tweaking, a little adjustment, it becomes just right for you. Okay? Hopefully I've given you some ideas and some understanding as far as how to do the setups, what changes you can make, and how to make your car fast, lasting, and raceable. Okay, that was the objectives of what we're trying to do. Okay, well, I'll see you on the track then. If you have any questions, shoot it to me at the forum, and we'll see you on the track and have some fun. How about it? Take it easy.